Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And if you're thinking to yourself that this sounds weird, you're right. It sounds weird because I'm in a courtyard by Marriott, like actually in the courtyard by Marriott. Did you know they had those? I just assumed it was like a quaint name, but they have a courtyard in the middle with trees and cicadas, and it's absolutely lovely and the quietest place I could find to record because I'm out on the road doing a bunch of interviews and church visits for the YouTube channel, which I really want to talk to you about, but I'm going to wait on anyway. And, well, I don't have a microphone where I'm sitting, so we're doing it this way. Thanks for bearing with me on a little different audio. And by different, I mean vastly inferior audio today. We're talking about Pontius Pilate. We're in Matthew 27:26, ends with the whole scene with Peter denying Jesus, and we leave Peter weeping bitterly, and that's the last we're going to see of him until we get into other parts of the Bible. Then in 27, as we've discussed, it looks like Matthew's trying to bump Judas's failure and the consequences for that failure right up against Peter's. But in the middle of that is Matthew is resetting the scene a little bit. We get an allusion to the dude we started talking about yesterday, that being Pontius Pilate. The passage goes like this. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans for how to have Jesus executed. So they bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. That brings us to today's question, and that is, well, who actually is this Pontius Pilate fellow? Most of these governors, we don't know anything about. They're just lost to history, but this guy oversaw two pretty influential events, so we know his name. One is the Jesus of Nazareth thing, obviously. The second is the foment and the discomfort and the destabilization that occurred on his watch. It's about 10 years long. That represents the longest governorship at this point in the relatively young history of this province of Judea. And all of those problems that happened on his watch, later historians say, that's really connected to what went wrong in 70 AD, the Jewish rebellion, what would eventually lead to Judea losing that client king status and being stripped of being a privileged province. Does this seem like there's an abnormal amount of P's happening today? I mean, the Pontius Pilate thing just makes all the other P's totally pop. I've been pondering that. I'm sure you're catching it as well. Moving on. Pontius Pilate, it looks like, was probably from a town close to Rome, central or maybe central northern Italian peninsula. Probably he was low-ranking nobility from a low-ranking noble family that owned a little bit of land, but not much. Sometimes people in this sort of middle noble class were called equestrians, and they had the ability to rise through the ranks and generate some political momentum for themselves, though it wasn't an automatic birthright like it might be for a higher-ranking noble class who held land and property and business interests in Rome itself. So Pilate somehow catches the attention of the court of Tiberius Caesar. We're going to talk more about that particular Caesar down the road a little bit, but he's the one who's in charge when Jesus of Nazareth is executed. Now, Pilate succeeds a guy named Valerius Gratus. I think that's right, Grattus. Don't know much about him, but what we do know is, or what we can deduce, is that Pilate probably would have needed to have some kind of benefactor is not the right word. What do you call it when somebody goes to bat for you? I don't know. Somebody vouched for him real hard. And the historical theory is that Tiberius, the emperor's right-hand man, a guy named Aelius Sejanus, a very sophisticated politician, probably was the dude who was vouching for Pilate to get him this position. But being buddies with Aelius Sejanus in the court of Tiberius was a risky affair. Now, more on that in just a second. Pilate is on wobbly ground pretty early from his time in Judea. He just doesn't read the room. He doesn't get it. He doesn't understand Judaism. He doesn't understand the Messiah thing. And he really, really wants to make Tiberius happy. His behaviors betray his insecurity. So you can tell he's doing stupid, over-the-top gestures that don't really help anybody, that kind of sound vaguely to him like things that people did when they wanted to impress an emperor or something. But when you try to do that because you're feeling insecure and you don't really understand the little nuances of the jokes or the gestures or the social moves at a party that's maybe a little fancier than what you normally go to. So you just try to imitate things that other people are doing, but it comes off stupider when you do it and you never actually figure out why. Maybe I'm the only one and I should be embarrassed, but I have that experience. I feel like that's what we kind of get from Pilate here. He sticks pictures of Emperor Tiberius in dumb places that are provocative. People get irritated and they start writing letters back to the home office in Rome. And it looks like Tiberius was probably just irritated by that. Jewish leaders fire off letters. Other political leaders are like, this guy's an idiot. He's just not doing a good job. But that only makes Pilate try harder. And so then he moves from putting up pictures and sculptures and banners and stuff in ways that is akin to idolatry to the Jewish people. And instead is like, all right, well then I'm gonna score some points with the locals here and prove that I'm a real boy by putting down some of these religious rebels that the Jewish people don't like. So he goes to do that peaceably, but it isn't solved peaceably, and that just causes more problems and irritation. Then he's like, I know, I'll make them like me. I'll make them like me by finishing that public works project that isn't getting done around here. I'm going to finish the great aqueduct. Cool, fresh water for my subjects will make them love me. And the more they love me, the more cooperative they are, and the more they pay taxes, and the less they rebel. And Tiberius is going to think I'm super, and that I really earned this position on my own without anybody vouching for me. So he goes and dips into the temple treasury to pay for it, and that doesn't go over well with the Jewish people either. And so they're right at the doorstep of rebellion or riot several times. There's a threat of like a Jewish religious suicide riot if Pilate doesn't change his policies. These are not small issues. Now, I think all of that stuff is really interesting, but I think it gets even interestinger right here, because it looks like about the time that Pilate is really wobbling and could most use to lean on any court buddies he might have back home. It looks like at that exact moment support dries up back home. Tiberius didn't like governing that much for a while. He went into a funk and he kind of got addicted to the illicit pleasures that only an emperor could afford, and he migrated his seat of power down to the Isle of Capri off of Naples, I guess, a little ways south. So he's not paying attention. And while Tiberius isn't really attentive to things, it looks like Aelius Sejanus is kind of running things, the guy who's maybe the benefactor, the court supporter of Pilate politically. Well, Sejanus develops ambitions of his own. Those ambitions get exposed. Tiberius realizes that his right-hand man is selling him out, and Tiberius returns to court to have Aelius Sejanus executed. That happens depending on exactly how you date the whole life of Jesus thing. It looks like that happens pretty close to right before the events we are reading about in Matthew 27, meaning that if we're getting all of this stuff right, Pilate was under massive political pressure. His mind was not in the game in Jerusalem or Caesarea, a few miles up the road where he governed. His head is on Rome. His head is on the status of his own head and whether or not he's going to face the same fate as Sejanus. He just can't afford anything else to go wrong. He really needs all of this stuff to work out. He's in maximum self-preservation mode at this point, even compared to his already rocky tenure as governor. And then Annas and Caiaphas and the religious leaders arrest somebody who they say is blaspheming the temple and claiming to be some sort of political threat to Pilate, and they bind him up and they drop him on Pilate's doorstep, and they're like, you have to do something. Pilate didn't want this problem. This doesn't help him at all, and now he's going to have to make a decision. Do I try to impress Tiberius, who honestly might not even be paying attention? Should I even try to impress him? Do I try to impress Tiberius by making some noble, just judgment and going against the will of the rabble of the people I govern who are demanding an injustice? Or do I pacify the people who are increasingly unhappy with me to demonstrate that I'm willing to make shrewd political decisions and some sacrifices and corner cuttings when it comes to justice in order to keep them under control and maintain stability? I think that's what's running through his mind, when Jesus shows up. I don't think Pilate is like, I wonder if he is the true and actual Messiah. Does anybody have a tract with any Bible verses in it that could help me figure out if I need to invite him into my heart? I just don't think he cares. And hopefully that sets the table a little bit better for when we encounter Pilate next. Thanks for hanging out with me in this lovely courtyard. I think I'll have a real microphone tomorrow, and that will sound swell. I'm Matt. This is the 10 Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.